the news tonight, Israel eases restrictions on Gaza as part of implementing a truce which ended a week of fierce fighting, and normal life resumes in the enclave. Anger among opponents to the Egyptian president's decision to assume sweeping powers continues for the second day, and Egyptian judges announce a strike in protest at his decree. And polls for regional elections in Catalonia open tomorrow amid warnings from the Spanish Prime Minister that the region would have to reapply to join the European Union. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Israel has eased restrictions on Gaza as part of implementing a three-day-old truce brokered by Egypt, which ended a week of fierce fighting. A statement from the office of Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh said Egypt notified them that Israel has allowed Palestinian fishermen to fish in Gaza's waters, upping the distance restrictions from 6.9 kilometers to 4.8. Israel also eased restrictions on Palestinian farmers, allowing them to tend land close to the Israeli frontier fence. The Israeli military had barred Palestinians from coming within 300 meters of the border since 2009. Hamas, for its part, deployed more police on the border with Israel to keep Gazans away from the fence, which is secured by Israeli soldiers. In another indication that normal life is returning to Gaza, thousands of Gaza students returned to school today. Although many of the schools were damaged, children were happy to resume their studies. Some 220,000 students receive education at UN schools in Gaza, the majority of which are overcrowded. This report has more.
It appears a school day like any other, but this is Gaza, where even the schools are vulnerable to attack. Children went back to class on Saturday after a truce between Israel and Hamas appears to have ended an 8-day offensive that killed 139 Gazans, including 34 children and 5 Israelis. The headmistress of El Zaytoun school said teachers were trying to give the children a normal school day.
We tried to renovate the school and keep the students away from the damage. Windows and doors were damaged. We are trying to create a real school day for students after all that's happened.
With over half of the 1.7 million Gazans aged under 18, the Palestinian enclave is one of the youngest populations in the world. More than 200,000 students are receiving educations at UN schools, the majority of which suffer from overcrowding and double shifting, where one building serves 2 separate sets of teachers and students.
Iranian Parliament Speaker Ali Larijani in Turkey to celebrate Ashura said Israel will face tougher days ahead. Addressing thousands of Shiites in Istanbul, Larijani condemned Israel and its allies for attacking Gaza, saying all kinds of lethal bombs were used against Palestinians. He described Western representatives who visited Israel during the Gaza attack as accomplices, saying they should have condemned the bloodshed in Gaza. Over 160 Palestinians and 6 Israelis died in the fighting. Before arriving in Istanbul, Larijani said Iran is in talks with Turkey to reduce the two countries' differences in opinion on how to resolve the crisis in Syria. Yesterday, Larijani held talks in Beirut with representatives from Palestinian factions on the situation in Gaza. Earlier in Damascus, he met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to discuss an end to the fighting in Syria. Meanwhile, demonstrations against Israel's assault on Gaza continued in several parts of the world, even after a truce entered its third day today. More than 1,000 people gathered in central Paris to express support to the Palestinian people and call for the official recognition of a Palestinian state. The protesters chanted anti-Israeli slogans and carried Palestinian flags and called for a boycott with Israel. A truce now is not enough to satisfy the protesters gathered in Paris. And in the Bolivian capital, another protest was staged to denounce Israel for the bloody conflict on the Gaza Strip. Demonstrators also called for a Palestinian state and urged the United Nations to offer its backing to the Palestinians' fight for statehood in an upcoming meeting of the General Assembly. Similar protests also took place in neighboring Argentina and Venezuela. The body of the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat will be exhumed from its limestone mausoleum in 3 days in an investigation to establish if he was murdered. Separate samples will be taken from the body by the French and Swiss forensic teams, as well as by a Russian team of experts who were asked by Palestinian officials to help with the investigation. Experts say it could take up to several months before any results are announced. Arafat died in a Paris military hospital in November 2004, and no autopsy was carried out and no cause of death was established. In July, the Swiss Institute of Radiation Physics in Lausanne said it discovered high levels of the radioactive element polonium-210 on Arafat's clothing supplied by his wife, who has called for the exhumation of his body. 8 years is considered a limit to detect any traces of the deadly radioactive substance.
We as Palestinians are convinced Yasser Arafat was assassinated. We will not close this file. We will investigate it until we find the killer. On the 27th of November, we will exhume the body. The ceremony is closed to media due to the sacredness of this man. This shouldn't be on the cameras of the media outlets.
Street protests in Cairo entered their second day today in demonstrations against President Morsi's decision to assume sweeping powers. Angry youth surrounded a burnt-out school which was being occupied by people and hurled rocks at the building while the riot police fired tear gas into the crowd. The youths have been protesting since yesterday, many of them camping in the center of Tahrir Square. Political parties, angered by President Mohamed Morsi's decision to grant himself sweeping new powers, have called on their supporters to protest against the move. His decision has prompted violent clashes in central Cairo and other cities since yesterday. As the people protested in Cairo, judges are protesting in Alexandria. The Egyptian president is facing a rebellion from judges who accuse him of expanding his powers at their expense. Judges in Alexandria, Egypt's second city, threatened to go on strike until the decision was revoked. There were also calls for the downfall of the regime during a meeting of judges in Cairo. Egypt's highest judicial authority, the Supreme Judicial Council, said the decree was an unprecedented attack on the independence of the judiciary. And the German Foreign Minister Guido Westerwelle called on the Egyptian president to continue work on developing democracy in Egypt and the separation of powers in the country. Speaking to reporters in Germany, Westerwelle said it is necessary to find a balance internally in Egypt and to ensure that the constitutional process towards democracy continues. He commended the instrumental role Morsi had in the mediation of the ceasefire in Gaza and hoped that he would exert his efforts towards his own country.
Wir beobachten die Entwicklungen in Ägypten.
We see the developments in Egypt with great concern. We are anxious that the process towards democracy and the rule of law and the separation of powers will continue. At the same time, we share the worries of the people of Egypt and the international community regarding the recent internal developments in Egypt. It is very important that the ideas of the revolution are not lost in these times of change.
And over to the crisis in Syria and on the Syrian-Turkish border, there were reports of renewed gunfire from the Syrian border town of Ras Al Ain that could be heard from Turkey. Volleys of gunfire rang out from the town where soldiers kept watch from lookout points. Dozens of rebels had gathered in an empty space on the outskirts of the town as fighting could be heard from inside. Rebels have maintained a tentative hold over the northern Syrian town, which has been repeatedly bombed bombarded by Syrian government forces. Meanwhile, Turkey said it expects a decision from NATO about deploying surface-to-air Patriot missiles along its southern border with Syria within the next week. Turkish Defense Minister İsmet Yılmaz said Ankara asked for the missiles to intercept Syrian aircraft or missile due to the critical situation on the border. He said the aim is to protect the widest possible area in Turkey. NATO said it would discuss the request without delay, but Syria and its allies called the move provocative. Hundreds of thousands of Shiite pilgrims poured into Iraq's holy city of Karbala to commemorate Ashura, which marks the death of Imam al-Hussein at the Battle of Karbala. Shiite Iraqis as well as thousands of foreign pilgrims took part in the ceremony. Security officials assigned thousands of police officers and soldiers to protect the pilgrims as they headed to Imam al-Hussein's shrine, as ambulances were on stand to offer emergency medical care. Shiite Muslims, who make up nearly 15% of the Islamic world, mourn for a month as part of the festival. Ashura is observed in Iraq as well as Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Syria. Residents of Catalonia are set to choose a new government tomorrow in an election that could trigger a constitutional crisis over a resurgent Catalan breakaway movement. Opinion polls show most Catalans will vote for pro-independence parties, handing their leader a mandate to hold a referendum on secession despite strong resistance from the Spanish government. Here's more with Asya Al-Hattab.
According to opinion polls, between 46% and 57% of Catalans want their own country. And analysts believe it isn't so much cultural identity that has breathed new life into the secession movement, but frustration over taxes, unemployment, and recession. An increasing number of the most ardent supporters of Catalan independence do not even have roots in the region. There are immigrants from the rest of Spain who have embraced separatism because they believe Catalonia, historically an economic powerhouse, would be more prosperous on its own.
They always say it is because of the economy, but it isn't. We love Spain, we love our language, we love our culture. Catalonia has always taken people in. You can ask other people about that. We change the language if we need, because Spanish and Catalan can coexist. But it is so weird. We love our culture and our language.
Estimem Catalunya I estimem la nostra llengua.
Catalonia's busy Mediterranean ports, car factories, chemical plants, and bank account for a fifth of Spain's economy. Until recently, the region of 7.5 million people were content to push for greater self-governance, such as collecting and spending its own taxes without seeking independence. But Spain's recession, with 25% unemployment and drastic public spending cuts, has sharpened a Catalan perception that they are taxed unfairly.
If they said, hey, thanks for helping us out, because we do help them out, but they don't, and we are bad, we are cheap, and we are the worst possible thing, so bye-bye, I totally want to leave, I wish we left, but I think I'm too old and I won't see it happening.
Catalan President Artur Mas is expected to win re-election in voting for the Regional Assembly in Barcelona, after he converted to the independence cause, following a massive pro-secession march in September. Mas has promised to hold a referendum on independence if he is re-elected, a move Madrid says contravenes the constitution. Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, however, warns that Catalonia would have to reapply to join the European Union if left Spain, a lengthy process, while King Juan Carlos has also called for unity. But pro-independence Catalans argue that a strong referendum majority for independence would force Spain to change the constitution, and the EU would have to respect self-determination. Asya Hattab for the news at 10.
Pope Benedict appointed 6 non-European prelates to the high rank of Roman Catholic cardinal, chipping away at Europe's domination of the elite group that will one day elect his successor. The new cardinals, ranging in age from 53 to 72, are from the United States, India, Nigeria, the Philippines, Lebanon, and Colombia. All 6 are cardinal electors, those under 80 years old, and therefore eligible to enter a conclave that will one day choose Benedict's successor. The decision to choose no Italians or Europeans looked like an attempt to counter criticism that the Pope has in the past neglected the needs of the developing world. In a solemn ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Benedict said his appointments reflect that the Church is a church of all peoples. Cardinals are the Pope's closest aides in the Vatican, where they run its key departments, and around the world, where they head a diocese to administer the 1.2 billion members of the Roman Catholic Church. And Christmas ceremonies are already underway in the West Bank, in the birthplace of Jesus. Scores of worshippers welcomed the Pope's envoy to the Middle East, Father Pierbattista Bisaballa, and other senior priests on arrival in the biblical town of Bethlehem. The arrival of Pierbattista, who is the custodian of the Holy Land, marks the Advent or the beginning of preparations for the festive season. 3 Christian denominations, the Armenians, Roman Catholics, and Greek Orthodox, all share control of the church in the West Bank town. And back here at home, and the city of Madaba, famous for its mosaic frescoes and historical sites, hosted a mosaic festival to highlight its tourist attractions, foremost of which are its well-kept mosaic artifacts. The city hosts over 46 archaeological and historic sites and is one of Jordan's leading tourist attractions. The festival, including folklore, music and children's activities, is the first to be held in Madaba and is set to become an annual event to further promote domestic and international tourism to the city. On the sidelines, an exhibition of mosaic art is being held to showcase the ancient art along with other local handicrafts by Jordanian craftsmen and women.
Madaba is known the city of mosaic, and we call it the world's capital of mosaic, not only Jordan's capital of mosaic. For this reason, we organize this festival to highlight the tourism attraction of the city, the mosaic attraction, which brings in thousands of tourists each year. In 2002, about 50,000 tourists flocked to Madaba, and the number continues to increase. In 2010, the number exceeded 400,000, and we hope to continue to attract more and more tourists each year.
Larry Hagman, best known as J.R. Ewing of soap opera Dallas, died at the age of 81. Hagman died at a Dallas hospital of complications from his battle with throat cancer. Hagman became a star in 1965 on the popular television sitcom I Dream of Jeannie, in which he played Major Anthony Nelson, an astronaut who discovers a beautiful genie in a bottle. But it was Dallas, which made its premiere on the CBS network in 1978, that made Hagman a superstar. Dallas made 356 episodes and ran for 13 years. The popularity of Dallas made Hagman one of the best paid actors in television and earned him a fortune that even his character on the show would have coveted. Olympic champions Usain Bolt and Allyson Felix were named Male and Female Athlete of the Year by the International Association of Athletics Federations, IAAF, in Barcelona. 27-year-old Felix was part of the Olympic gold medal winning 4x400 meters relay team and became the first woman since 1988 to win 3 gold medals at a singles game. She was also honored for her Olympic medal in the 200 meters by Prince Albert of Monaco. 6-time Olympic champion Bolt of Jamaica, who retained his 100 and 200 meters titles in London in August, is the first man to win the Male Athlete Award 4 times after success in 2008, 2009 and 2011. He also anchored the Jamaican quartet to a world record in the Olympic 4x100 meters relay of 36.84 seconds. And finally, to the weather outlook. It continues to be cold and partly cloudy tonight with westerly light winds. Similar weather conditions prevail tomorrow with a chance for showers. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Here now to look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. Israel eases restrictions on Gaza as part of implementing a truce which ended a week of fierce fighting, and normal life resumes in the enclave. Anger among opponents to the Egyptian president's decision to assume sweeping powers continues for the second day, and Egyptian judges announce a strike in protest at his decree. And polls for regional elections in Catalonia open tomorrow amid warnings from the Spanish Prime Minister that the region would have to reapply to join the European Union. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.